crooked FL sheriff just got worst news of his life. Although the Broward County Sheriff's Office said they are officially investigating allegations that multiple deputies failed to enter Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida as the suspected shooter was in the process of killing 17 students. Yesterday Sheriff Scott Israel got some devastating news from none other than the governor of Florida, Rick Scott. Dana Loesch on her radio show on Friday gave frightening details about what went on during the shooting. It wasn't one deputy who refused to go in while this murderer was on his killing spree, it was 4. And what makes this even more unbelievable is the fact that the neighboring county police department is now saying they were the ones who went in first because the Broward County Sheriff's Department deputies only stood there listening to the shooting and screams for over 4 minutes but for some reason decided to not go in, which let the carnage continue and the shooter get away. Because the facts that have come to light since the Parkland shooting, Governor Rick Scott has now called for Israel's immediate resignation. To add to his mischief, we later discovered that Sheriff Israel was one of the people who instigated the CNN fake news town hall narrative in which Dana Loesch actually needed armed security to get out of alive. People in attendance confirmed that before the official town hall started, the sheriff riled up the crowd against guns by speaking half-truths and outright lies. This was the part of the town hall which CNN didn't broadcast. Convenient, don't you agree? It's obvious Scott Israel has his own agenda. And it's not about banning guns, it's about deflecting from the cowardliness of himself and his own deputies. His department did nothing as children screamed and cried while they were being killed in cold blood as these people who are sworn to protect us just hung out outside the building and did nothing about it. Are you sure we should give up our guns? Especially after learning about these cowards who are sworn to protect us in Broward County? Via WKDV. Broward County Sheriff Scott Israel says he's not stepping down amid criticism of his department's response to the deadly shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Israel's declaration comes after a Florida state representative called on Governor Rick Scott to remove Israel from his post for his deputies' incomprehensible inaction during the massacre. An investigation by Sheriff Israel will do nothing to bring back the 17 victims, Bill Hager said in a letter to the governor, referring to the students and teachers' confessed shooter, Nikolas Cruz, killed. The sheriff was or should have been aware of the threat Cruz presented to his community and chose to ignore it, Hager claims. He's referring to a long history of warnings and tips to the sheriff's office over the past decade, including ones suggesting Cruz had firearms and was planning a school shooting. In his letter, Hager, a Republican, cites Florida Statute 112.52, which he says gives Scott removal authority for neglect of duty and incompetence. Israel dismisses Hager's accusations, telling CNN's Jake Tapper, "Of course I won't resign. It was a shameful letter. It was politically motivated. I never met that man. He doesn't know anything about me. And the letter was full of misinformation," Israel said on CNN's State of the Union. Hager's call for Israel's removal came after the armed school resource officer at Marjory Stoneman Douglas, Deputy Scott Peterson, resigned Thursday following his suspension amid accusations he did nothing to stop the massacre. Israel says Peterson never went into building where the shooter was firing at students, instead taking a position outside. In a letter of response to the governor, Israel said he was proud of the work that many of his deputies and other agencies did the day of the shooting and that he was appalled by Hager's need to engage in disingenuous political grandstanding, perhaps in the hope he will garner some headlines, at the expense of the truth. He also said that Hager's letter was riddled with factual errors, unsupported gossip, and falsehoods. Deputy suspended. Israel made the decision to suspend Peterson, who was armed and in uniform at the time of the shooting, after interviewing the deputy and reviewing footage and witness statements, he said. "What I saw was a deputy arrive at the west side of Building 12, take up a position," Israel said of the video. "And he never went in." Israel told reporters Peterson should have, addressed the killer. Killed the killer. Instead, the deputy waited outside for about 4 minutes. During that time, Israel said, Peterson got on his radio and took a position where he could see the western entry of the building. Other deputies may have also been outside school. Israel says his department is also looking into reports that at least 3 other Broward Sheriff's deputies didn't enter the school building during shooting. Sources tell CNN the Coral Springs officers arrived at the scene and were surprised to find the 3 deputies behind their vehicles with their pistols drawn. None of them had gone into the school. Israel says his department will investigate the Coral Springs officers' claims, but insists that during this horrific attack, while this killer was inside the school, there was only one law enforcement person, period. And that was our former deputy Scott Peterson. Israel says his department's investigation so far indicates the Coral Springs officers didn't arrive until about 4 minutes after Cruz had left the campus. At this point, we have no reason to believe anyone acted incorrectly or correctly. That's what an investigation is. Everybody is entitled to their own opinion, but nobody is entitled to their own set of facts, Israel says. At this point, one deputy was remiss. And he's now no longer with this agency. A report on what Coral Springs officers observed is expected next week. Sources caution that surveillance video is currently being reviewed and official accounts could ultimately differ from recollections of officers on the scene. Sergeant Carla Kmiotek, public information officer for the Coral Springs Police Department, would not comment on the reports. The Coral Springs Police Department will speak on behalf of our officers and their response in that incident, she said. We will not speak on behalf of Broward Sheriff's deputies and their response to the incident. Our police department has continued to work alongside the Broward Sheriff's Office to assist in any investigation pertaining to this incident, the department said later in a statement. The Coral Springs Police Department has a tremendous working relationship with the men and women of the Broward Sheriff's Office, and while we are being transparent through this investigation, everyone should respect the process. School shooter in the making, missed opportunities. Israel is also under fire for what appear to be several missed opportunities to intervene before Cruz opened fire. The Broward County Sheriff's Office says it received 23 calls related to Cruz or his brother in the past decade. 2 deputies have been placed on restricted duty pending an internal investigation on how they addressed the warnings, Israel says. 2 calls in particular are under review, one from February 5, 2016, and another from November 30 of last year. In the 2016 call, officers received information from a neighbor's son that Cruz planned to shoot up an unknown school. There was a picture of a juvenile with guns on Instagram, according to police records. In that case, a deputy responded and determined Cruz had knives and a BB gun. The information was forwarded to a school resource officer, police records show. In the report 3 months before the shooting, a caller warned that Cruz was collecting guns and knives and wanted to join the army. The person who called in that November 2017 tip said Cruz was suicidal and could be a school shooter in the making, according to police records. The report said that officers at the time did not write a report on the tip. Cruz was no longer living at the listed Parkland address and lived in Lake Worth, Florida, according to police records. The deputy referred the caller to the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. Israel acknowledges there needed to be a report on the call, and that's what we're looking into. That a report needed to be completed, it needed to be forwarded to our Homeland Security or Violent Crimes Unit and they would have followed up on it. When asked about the 23 calls regarding Cruz, Israel tells CNN, on 16 of those cases, our deputies did everything right. I can only